The millionaire froze when he saw the photo of his missing beloved in the farmer woman's house. The sleek private jet cut through the evening sky, its elegant silhouette a stark contrast against the darkening clouds gathering on the horizon. Inside, Alexander Reed sat alone with a glass of 18-year-old scotch, staring at quarterly reports that should have held his attention, but somehow failed to do so. At 52, Alexander had mastered the art of appearing engaged while his mind wandered elsewhere, a skill that served him well in boardrooms across the country. "Mr. Reed," the pilot's voice crackled through the intercom. "We're getting some concerning weather reports from ahead. A storm system has developed unexpectedly over eastern Texas." Alexander sighed, setting down the financial projections for Reed Enterprises' newest development, a luxury residential complex that would add another $1 billion to his already substantial fortune. "Can we go around it?" he asked, though he already knew the answer from the pilot's tone. "I'm afraid not, sir. It's moving too quickly and spreading wide. We should consider landing at a smaller regional airport ahead and waiting it out." Alexander checked his watch. A Swiss timepiece worth more than what most people earned in a year. The board meeting wasn't until tomorrow afternoon in Houston. He could still make it if they continued in the morning. "Do what you need to do, Jenkins," he said, reaching for the bottle to pour another finger of scotch. The luxury that surrounded him, hand-stitched leather seats, mahogany paneling, crystal glassware, had long ceased to impress him. These were simply the expected trappings of success, the armor he wore in a world where appearance was everything and substance often nothing. His phone buzzed with a message from Victor Ramsey, his longtime business partner. "Morgan Brothers getting cold feet on the Houston deal. Need you to work your magic tomorrow." Alexander didn't bother responding. Victor knew how to handle difficult clients, probably better than Alexander himself these days. In the 25 years of their partnership, Victor had proven himself indispensable, especially during those dark months after Teresa disappeared. Teresa, even now, after all these years, her name sent a hollow ache through his chest. The plane suddenly lurched, sending his scotch sloshing over the rim of his glass. Lightning flashed outside the window, illuminating angry clouds that seemed much closer than they had minutes ago. "Mr. Reed," the pilot's voice was tighter now. "The storm has intensified. We need to make an emergency landing. There's a small airstrip about 10 miles ahead. It's our best option." "Whatever you need to do," Alexander said, tightening his seatbelt as the plane began to buck and shake. The next 20 minutes were a blur of violent turbulence, flashing emergency lights, and the steady stream of technical jargon between his pilot and co-pilot, Alexander Reed, a man who controlled billion-dollar deals with a signature, found himself utterly powerless against the fury of nature. The landing was hard, metal screaming against tarmac, the fuselage groaning under pressure. A particularly violent jolt threw Alexander forward, his head connecting with something solid. Pain exploded behind his eyes as darkness threatened to overtake him. When the plane finally stopped, an eerie silence fell, broken only by the relentless drumming of rain against metal and the distant rumble of thunder. "Jenkins," Alexander called out, touching his forehead and finding his fingers wet with blood. "Andrews." The lack of response sent a spike of fear through him. Unbuckling his seatbelt, he made his way unsteadily to the cockpit, finding both pilots unconscious but breathing. The radio was dead, the control panel dark. Outside, through the rain-lashed windshield, Alexander could see nothing but blackness. No lights, no buildings, none of the infrastructure one would expect even at a small airfield. Where the hell were they? Returning to the cabin, Alexander located the emergency kit and did what he could for the cut on his forehead. His phone showed no service, not even a single bar. The plane's satellite phone was equally useless, dead after that hard landing. "Fantastic," he muttered to himself. Alexander Reed, worth over $7 billion, found himself completely cut off from the world that catered to his every whim. The irony wasn't lost on him. Grabbing a flashlight from the emergency kit and wrapping himself in his expensive cashmere coat, Alexander forced open the door against the howling wind. The rain hit him like tiny bullets, soaking him almost instantly. He swept the flashlight beam across what he could now see wasn't an airstrip at all, but simply a long, flat stretch of field where his pilot had managed a miraculous emergency landing. The wind nearly knocked him off his feet as he carefully made his way down the steps. His Italian leather shoes sank into mud, ruined in seconds. Alexander cursed under his breath. shielding his eyes against the stinging rain as he looked for any sign of civilization. And then, there it was, a faint glow in the distance. Maybe a mile away. Light meant people, and people meant help. With one last look at the unconscious pilots, Alexander made a decision. They were stable, and he couldn't move them in this weather. The best thing he could do was find help and come back. Each step was a battle against the mud that seemed determined to claim his shoes, against the wind that pushed him sideways, against the rain that limited visibility to just a few feet ahead. The flashlight beam bounced wildly as he walked, occasionally illuminating fence posts or gnarled trees bent low by the force of the wind. His head throbbed where he'd hit it, and the warm trickle of blood mixed with cold rainwater running down his face. The distant light seemed to taunt him, appearing no closer despite his efforts. Alexander couldn't remember the last time he had walked more than the distance from his office to his chauffeur-driven Bentley. His lungs burned, his legs ached, and the combination of pain, cold, and exertion was making him lightheaded. A particularly strong gust of wind nearly knocked him to his knees. As he struggled to regain his balance, his foot caught on something hidden in the tall grass. Alexander pitched forward, the flashlight flying from his grip as he fell. His outstretched hands met not mud, but the hard surface of what felt like a dirt road. He lay there for a moment, catching his breath, the rain pounding against his back. When he raised his head, he realized the light was much closer now. Not the distant glow he'd been following, but a warm yellow rectangle that could only be a window. With renewed determination, Alexander pushed himself to his feet. The flashlight was gone, lost somewhere in the grass, but he no longer needed it. The window light guided him forward. As he drew closer, the silhouette of a small farmhouse emerged from the darkness. No sleek modern lines like his Manhattan penthouse or his Hamptons estate. Just a simple two-story structure with a wide porch and what looked like a barn some distance behind. Alexander staggered the final few yards to the porch steps, his vision blurring. The warmth of the light seemed to promise safety, refuge from the storm that had brought his world crashing down around him. His hand, numbed by cold and shaking with exhaustion, rose to knock on the weathered wooden door. As his knuckles connected with the surface, Alexander Reed, a man who had everything but had lost the only thing that ever truly mattered, felt consciousness slipping away. The last thing he saw was the door swinging open and a woman's silhouette framed in golden light. Alexander drifted in and out of consciousness. Vaguely aware of being carried inside, strong arms supported him despite his tall frame. A woman's voice, soft but commanding, directed someone to bring towels and the first aid kit. The warmth of the house enveloped him like an embrace after the punishing cold of the storm. "He's bleeding pretty bad." "Mama," a child's voice said. "Head wounds always look worse than they are, Lily," the woman responded. "Get the lantern closer so I can see what we're dealing with." Alexander struggled to open his eyes. The pain in his head had dulled to a persistent throb, but disorientation clouded his thoughts. When he finally managed to focus, the dancing flame of an oil lantern illuminated the face above him. A young woman with concerned eyes the color of amber and dark hair pulled back in a practical braid. "You're awake," she said, pressing a cool cloth against his forehead. "Can you tell me your name?" "Alexander Reed," he managed, his voice rougher than he expected. "My plane. We had to make an emergency landing. The pilots are still there. They need help." The woman exchanged glances with someone outside Alexander's field of vision. "I'm Amelia," she said. "You're about 3 miles from where I'm guessing your plane went down. That's where the old Richardson field is. We'll have to wait until morning to check on your pilots. It's too dangerous in this storm, and we have no way to contact anyone until it passes." "No cell service?" Alexander asked, attempting to sit up before dizziness forced him back down onto what he now realized was a worn but comfortable sofa. A small laugh escaped Amelia. "No electricity, so definitely no cell service. We're pretty much off the grid here." Alexander blinked, taking in his surroundings for the first time. The room was lit entirely by lanterns and a crackling fire in a stone hearth. Simple, handmade furniture filled the space, and patchwork quilts hung over the backs of chairs. The windows rattled with each gust of wind, but the house felt solid, secure against the elements raging outside. "You live like this all the time?" he asked, unable to hide his disbelief. The concept of existing without the constant connectivity that defined modern life seemed impossible to him. Some of us prefer it, Amelia replied, a hint of defensiveness in her tone. Now hold still. That cut needs cleaning. A small face peered around Amelia's shoulder. A girl no more than 7, with the same amber eyes as her mother but lighter hair that curled wildly around her face. Is he a businessman? The child asked. He's wearing a suit like the men in my picture books. Lily, don't be nosy, Amelia gently scolded. But Alexander found himself smiling despite the pain. Yes, I am a businessman, he told her. From New York City. The girl's eyes widened. That's so far away. Did you fly here in a spaceship? Lily, Amelia said more firmly this time, but with obvious affection. It's past your bedtime. Go wash up, and I'll come tuck you in soon. The girl reluctantly retreated, casting curious glances over her shoulder until she disappeared through a doorway. Sorry about that, Amelia said, applying antiseptic to his wound with gentle fingers. She doesn't see many visitors. How do you manage out here? Alexander asked, genuinely curious. No electricity, no phone. What about medical emergencies or supplies? We're not completely isolated, Amelia explained, securing a bandage to his forehead. There's a small town about 10 miles from here. I drive in once a week for necessities. As for emergencies, we handle what we can and prepare for what we can't. She paused, studying him. Different from Manhattan skyscrapers, I imagine. Alexander looked at her with newfound interest. How did you know I'm from Manhattan? Lucky guess, she shrugged. Plus, those shoes probably cost more than my monthly expenses, even in their current state. Alexander glanced down at his mud-caked, once pristine Italian leather shoes and let out a short laugh. Fair point. You should rest, Amelia said, standing. We can figure out how to help your pilots in the morning. The storm's supposed to pass by dawn. How do you know the forecast without... Alexander began. My knees. An older voice interrupted. A man with weathered skin and silver hair stepped into the circle of lantern light. They ache something fierce before a storm breaks. Never been wrong yet. This is Earl, Amelia explained. He helps around the farm. Earl nodded in acknowledgement. Got the guest room ready? Can you walk, city slicker? Or do I need to carry you again? Alexander's pride bristled at the nickname, but softened at the genuine offer of help. I think I can manage. Thank you. With Earl's steadying hand, Alexander rose unsteadily to his feet. The room spun briefly before settling, and he realized how exhausted he was. Bone-deep weariness, unlike anything he'd felt before. Even his worst days closing international deals hadn't drained him like this. The guest room was small but neat, with a hand-stitched quilt on the bed and a pitcher of water on the bedside table. A lantern provided warm light that flickered against whitewashed walls. No television, no phone, no minibar, none of the amenities Alexander had come to expect even in the most modest hotels. Bathrooms down the hall if you need it, Earl explained. It's got running water, but it'll be cold tonight with the storm. There's extra blankets in the chest if you get chilled. After Earl left, Alexander sank onto the edge of the bed, feeling oddly displaced. His normal life, board meetings, investment decisions, political fundraisers, seemed impossibly distant in this simple room. He hadn't been without his phone or internet access for more than an hour in. He couldn't remember how long. Too exhausted to ponder the strangeness of his situation further, Alexander barely managed to remove his ruined shoes and suit jacket before collapsing onto the bed. The quilt smelled of sunshine and lavender, so different from the sanitized linens of luxury hotels. Despite the unfamiliarity of his surroundings, sleep claimed him almost instantly. Morning light filtered through simple curtains when Alexander next opened his eyes. The storm had passed, leaving behind that particular stillness that follows violent weather. For a moment, he didn't remember where he was. Then it all came rushing back. He rose stiffly, his expensive suit wrinkled beyond salvation. The house was quiet as he made his way down the hallway, following the scent of coffee. The farmhouse looked different in daylight, still simple but bathed in a warm glow that made the worn furniture seem homey rather than shabby. The kitchen was empty, but a mug sat beside a pot of coffee on an old-fashioned stove with a note, "Help yourself. We're checking on the chickens." Alexander poured himself coffee, surprised at how good it smelled. He wandered back to the living room, taking in details he'd missed the night before. Hand-carved shelves filled with well-worn books, dried flowers hanging from ceiling beams, a worn upright piano in the corner. Then he saw it. On a small side table, partially hidden by a stack of children's books, sat a silver frame. Inside was a photograph of a young woman with a familiar smile, a smile that had haunted Alexander's dreams for 25 years. The coffee mug slipped from his fingers and shattered on the wooden floor. It was Teresa. Alexander couldn't move, couldn't breathe. The shattered ceramic lay forgotten at his feet as he stared at the photograph. Teresa Parker, her chestnut hair catching sunlight, her smile just as radiant as he remembered. Not the formal portrait they'd used in the missing person reports, but a candid shot he'd never seen before. She looked older than when she disappeared, perhaps by several years. He reached for the frame with trembling hands. The glass was slightly clouded, the frame tarnished with age, but the image remained clear. Teresa sat on the porch of this very farmhouse, a book in her lap. She looked peaceful, content. The date stamped in orange numerals at the bottom corner read 7/1999, a full 3 years after she had vanished from his life. "What are you doing?" Alexander startled. Nearly dropping the frame, Amelia stood in the doorway, her expression shifting from surprise to wariness as she took in the broken mug and Alexander's pale face. "I'm sorry about the mess," he said, carefully setting the photo down. I know her." Amelia's posture stiffened. "That's my mother." The room seemed to tilt beneath Alexander's feet. "Your mother." Connections formed rapidly in his mind. Amelia's age, Teresa's disappearance, those amber eyes that had seemed vaguely familiar. Could it be possible? Was her name Teresa Parker? He asked, his voice barely above a whisper. Something changed in Amelia's expression, a wariness that bordered on suspicion. "How do you know that everyone here knew her as Hannah Miller?" Alexander sank into the nearest chair. "Because 25 years ago, she was supposed to marry me." Silence filled the room, heavy with implications. Amelia's face showed a rapid succession of emotions: disbelief, confusion, and then a hardening resolve. "That's not possible," she said firmly. "My mother had an accident before I was born. She lost most of her memories from before." "An accident?" Alexander leaned forward. "Car crash, from what I was told." Amelia crossed her arms. "The family that found her said she was pregnant and had no identification. She only remembered her first name, Teresa. She took the name Hannah Miller later." Alexander closed his eyes as memories crashed over him like waves. Out in New York, 1996. "You're working too hard," Teresa said, perching on the edge of his desk. Her engagement ring caught the light from his office window, sending tiny rainbows dancing across the stacks of contracts. Alexander smiled up at her. "Just one more deal to close before the wedding. I promise I'll be all yours for the honeymoon." "You'd better be." She leaned down to kiss him lightly. 2 weeks in Bali with no phones, no faxes, no Victor calling with emergencies. Alexander laughed. "I've already warned him. Speaking of Victor, have you finalized the guest list with him? He's been asking about seating arrangements." "All done," Teresa said. "Though I still don't understand why he's so concerned about who sits where. He just wants everything to be perfect for us." Teresa's expression softened. 3 more days, and I'll be Mrs. Reed. "The best business deal I'll ever make," Alexander teased, earning a playful swat. "I've got to run. Final dress fitting. Pick me up for dinner at 7. I'll be there." That was the last time he saw her. Teresa never made it to her dress fitting. Her car was found abandoned on the side of the road. No signs of struggle, no clues, just gone. "Mr. Reed?" Amelia's voice pulled him back to the present. Her expression had softened slightly, concern mixing with her suspicion. "Sorry," he said, running a hand over his face. "It's just, she disappeared 3 days before our wedding. There was a massive search, investigations, private detectives. Nothing. It was as if she vanished into thin air." He looked up at Amelia. "I never stopped looking for her." "If that's true," Amelia said slowly, "why didn't you find her? Why didn't you find us?" The accusation in her voice cut deep. "I tried," Alexander said quietly. "For years. Eventually, the trail went cold." Amelia shook her head, struggling with this revelation. I need time to process this." "I understand," Alexander said, though every fiber of his being wanted to demand answers about Teresa. where she had been, what she remembered, and most importantly, if Amelia was his daughter. Earl's gruff voice called from outside, breaking the tension. "Amelia, the gentlemen's pilots are here. They hiked over from the plane." Relief washed over Alexander. His pilots were safe, but the realization that he would soon have a way back to his world brought an unexpected pang. He couldn't leave now, not when he'd stumbled upon the mystery that had defined his adult life. "We should check on them," Amelia said, clearly grateful for the interruption. Outside, Jenkins and Andrews were sitting on the porch steps, looking worse for wear, but largely uninjured. They stood when Alexander appeared. "Mr. Reed, thank God you're all right," Jenkins said. "We woke up and you were gone. Thought you might have been thrown from the plane. I went looking for help," Alexander explained, introducing Amelia. "How bad is the damage to the jet?" Andrews shook his head. "It's not flying anytime soon, sir. The landing gear is shot, and there's structural damage to the wings. We managed to get the satellite phone working this morning and called for assistance. A recovery team is on the way, along with transportation for us." "How long?" Alexander asked. "At least 24 hours. The nearest road is washed out from the storm. They'll have to come in with specialized vehicles." Alexander nodded, a plan forming. "Jenkins, go with the recovery team when they arrive. Andrews, you can coordinate the jet repairs. I'll be staying locally for a few days." Both pilots looked surprised, but neither questioned him. They knew better than to challenge Alexander Reed's decisions. Amelia had gone inside during this exchange, and Alexander found her in the kitchen, aggressively kneading bread dough. "Your ride is coming tomorrow," she said, without looking up. "Yes, but I'd like to stay a bit longer if that's all right." Alexander watched her carefully. "There are questions that have haunted me for 25 years. Amelia's hand stilled. "My mother is gone. She died 3 months ago." The news hit Alexander like a physical blow after all this time, to have come so close only to be too late. "I'm sorry," he managed. She never fully recovered her memories. Amelia continued, her voice softer. Just fragments. She remembered being in love, being afraid. Sometimes she'd wake up calling someone's name, but she could never remember who when she was fully awake. "Was it my name?" Alexander asked hoarsely. Amelia met his gaze directly. "She didn't remember your name, but she kept that photo because she said the man who took it was important to her." Alexander swallowed hard. "I took that photo in Central Park, spring of 1995. A small voice interrupted them. "Mama, who's the man in the plane?" Lily stood in the doorway, her curious eyes moving between them. "This is Mr. Reed," Amelia said, quickly composing herself. "He'll be staying with us for a few days until his plane can be fixed." Lily studied Alexander with unabashed curiosity. "Do you like pancakes? Mama made them for breakfast." Despite everything, Alexander found himself smiling. "I love pancakes." As he followed them to the table, Alexander knew his decision was made. He would stay. He would search for answers about Teresa, and he would discover if Amelia was the daughter he never knew he had. He just had to be careful not to reveal too much too soon. Some truths were better discovered slowly, especially those that could shatter a person's understanding of their entire life. The recovery team arrived the next morning as promised. Alexander stood on the porch watching his pilots depart, his hand raised in a casual wave that belied the tumult of emotions beneath his calm exterior. Jenkins had given him a concerned look when he explained his decision to stay, but had ultimately handed over Alexander's emergency suitcase from the plane without comment. "Your car will be here in 2 days, sir," Jenkins had said. "I've informed Mr. Ramsey that you're safe but delayed." Alexander had nodded, deliberately vague about his plans. "Tell Victor not to worry about the Morgan brothers. He can handle them." Now, as the dust settled behind the departing vehicles, Alexander turned to find Amelia watching him from the doorway. "You really are staying," she said. It wasn't a question. "If that's still acceptable," Alexander replied. "I can compensate you for your hospitality." Amelia's expression tightened. "We don't need your money, Mr. Reed." "Alexander, please." She hesitated, then gave a curt nod. "Alexander, if you're staying, you might as well make yourself useful. We don't have room for idle hands around here." The corner of his mouth lifted. "What did you have in mind?" 20 minutes later, Alexander Reed, CEO of Reed Enterprises, owner of properties on 3 continents, found himself in worn clothes borrowed from Earl, helping to mend a section of fence damaged by the storm. The work was physical in a way he hadn't experienced since his youth. Before his meteoric rise in real estate development, "Might want to roll up those fancy sleeves," Earl advised, handing him a pair of work gloves that had seen better days. "Unless you want to ruin another expensive shirt," Alexander complied, oddly comfortable with the old man's gruff manner. "I gather you've been with this farm a long time." Earl nodded, his weathered face creasing with a smile. "Since before Amelia was born, knew her mother when she first came here. Confused, pregnant, and scared out of her wits." Alexander's hand stilled on the fence post. "What do you remember about that time?" Earl gave him a shrewd look. "Enough to know you're not just some businessman waiting for his plane to be fixed." He hammered a nail with practiced ease. "You knew her before." "I did," Alexander admitted. "We were engaged." Earl whistled low. "Well, I'll be damned." He studied Alexander's face. "You didn't know about the girl?" "No," Alexander said quietly. "I never knew Teresa was pregnant." Earl nodded slowly. "The Millers, the family that took Teresa in after the accident. They found her on the side of the road about 50 miles from here. Car wreck. She was pretty banged up. Couldn't remember much of anything except her first name and that she was pregnant." Alexander tried to imagine Teresa, his brilliant, vibrant Teresa, confused and alone. The thought made his chest ache. Did she ever remember more? Bits and pieces over the years? Nothing concrete. Earl paused. "Look, Amelia's had a rough time since Hannah, Teresa, passed. Finding out her whole life might be built on something different. It's a lot to take in." "I understand," Alexander said. "I'm not here to disrupt her life. I just need to know what happened." "Fair enough." Earl handed him another nail. "Fence isn't going to fix itself." For the rest of the morning, Alexander worked alongside Earl, learning the rhythm of hammer and nail, the right tension for wire, how to check for rot in the wooden posts. By noon, his hands were blistered despite the gloves, his back ached, and he'd developed a new respect for the physical labor he'd left behind decades ago. When they returned to the house for lunch, Alexander found Lily sitting at the kitchen table, concentrating fiercely on her schoolwork. She looked up as they entered, her eyes widening at Alexander's disheveled appearance. "You look like a real farmer now," she declared. Alexander laughed. "I don't think real farmers would agree with you." "Mama says you're from New York," Lily continued, setting her pencil down. "That's where the Big Apple is." "That's right," Alexander said, washing his hands at the sink. "Have you ever been there?" Lily shook her head. "Mama says cities are too busy. Do you have a farm there too?" "No farm," Alexander admitted. "Just a lot of tall buildings. Like in my books." Lily jumped up and ran to a shelf, returning with a well-worn children's book about city life. "Like these?" Alexander looked at the illustrated skyscrapers. "Yes, very much like those. I live at the top of one." Lily's eyes grew round. "Like a princess in a tower." "Something like that," Alexander said, smiling, as he looked at her animated face. He couldn't help but search for traces of Teresa, and perhaps himself in her features. This was his granddaughter. He was increasingly certain. The thought sent a surge of emotion through him that he hadn't anticipated. "Lunch is ready," Amelia announced, entering with a basket of fresh bread. She paused, taking in the scene of Lily showing Alexander her book. Something softened in her expression momentarily before she composed herself. "Wash up, Lily, Earl. Could you call Jackson from the back field? He needs to eat too." Alexander watched her efficient movements as she set the table. "Who's Jackson?" "Our farmhand," Amelia explained. "He comes 3 days a week to help with the heavier work." The meal was simple but delicious. Fresh bread, vegetable soup, and slices of ham. Alexander couldn't remember the last time he'd eaten food prepared outside a 5-star restaurant or his personal chef's kitchen. There was something deeply satisfying about it, especially after a morning of physical labor. "Mr. Alexander's hands got all red from the fence," Lily announced as they ate. "Earl says he needs tougher skin." Amelia glanced at Alexander's hands, noticing the blisters and reddened skin. "There's salve in the medicine cabinet," she said. "It helps with blisters." "Thank you," Alexander said. The work was invigorating. A ghost of a smile crossed Amelia's face. That's one word for it. After lunch, While Earl and Jackson returned to the fields, Amelia set Lily up with her afternoon lessons. "I homeschool her," she explained to Alexander's unasked question. "The nearest school is too far for daily trips." "You're a woman of many talents," Alexander observed. Something indecipherable crossed Amelia's face. Necessity, not talent. "May I ask you something?" Alexander ventured when Lily was absorbed in her work. Amelia hesitated, then nodded. "Did Teresa, Hannah, leave anything behind? Letters, journals, anything that might explain what happened to her?" Amelia studied him for a long moment. "Yes," she finally said. "There's a trunk in the attic with her things. I haven't gone through all of it yet. It's been difficult." "I understand," Alexander said softly. "Would it be possible for me to see it?" The wariness returned to Amelia's eyes. "Why should I trust you with her private things?" "Because I loved her," Alexander said simply. "And because I've spent 25 years wondering what happened to her." Amelia's resolve seemed to waver. "I'll think about it," she said finally. That evening, after Lily was tucked into bed, Amelia found Alexander on the porch, staring at the stars visible in the clear night sky. "You don't see stars like this in Manhattan," he said as she approached. "One advantage of no electricity," she replied, sitting in the rocking chair beside him. After a moment of silence, she spoke again. "If I show you my mother's things, I want to be there too. I have questions of my own." Alexander turned to her. "Of course. Tomorrow then," Amelia said, rising. After morning chores, as she turned to go, Alexander spoke. "Amelia, thank you." She paused in the doorway. "Don't thank me yet. You might not like what you find." The attic was exactly as Alexander might have expected in a farmhouse this old. Shadowy corners filled with forgotten furniture, boxes of seasonal decorations, and the musty scent of preserved memories. Morning light filtered through a small circular window, illuminating dust motes that danced in the air. "Watch your head," Amelia warned as she led him between exposed beams. She carried an oil lantern, its flame flickering with their movement. "The trunk is over here." In the far corner sat an old steamer trunk, its leather straps cracked with age. Amelia set the lantern on a nearby table and knelt before it, her fingers hesitating on the brass latch. "I started going through it after she died, but..." She didn't finish the sentence. She didn't need to. Alexander knelt beside her, careful to maintain a respectful distance. "Take your time." Amelia took a deep breath and opened the trunk. The hinges creaked in protest, revealing neatly folded clothes on top. Simple dresses and blouses that Alexander could never imagine Teresa wearing. The Teresa he knew had favored elegant designer pieces. Her wardrobe a reflection of her rising career in architectural design. "These were her everyday clothes," Amelia explained, gently moving them aside. She always dressed simply, but kept everything immaculate. Beneath the clothing lay several leather-bound journals, a wooden box, and a bundle of envelopes tied with faded ribbon. Amelia lifted out the bundle with careful hands. "I found these first," she said quietly. "Letters she wrote but never sent. I've only read a few." She untied the ribbon and handed Alexander an envelope. His name was written on the front in Teresa's distinctive handwriting, slightly different than he remembered. Shakier. Less confident, but unmistakably hers. "May I?" he asked, his voice rough with emotion. Amelia nodded with careful fingers. Alexander opened the envelope and unfolded the letter inside. The paper was yellowed at the edges, the ink faded but legible. April 18th, 1998. "Alexander, if that is truly your name. I dreamed of you again last night, in the dream. We were standing on a balcony overlooking a city I've never seen, but somehow know. You were pointing at buildings, telling me which ones you designed, which ones I designed. It was so vivid I woke up certain I would find you beside me. The doctor says these dreams might be memories trying to surface, or simply my mind's attempt to fill the emptiness where my past should be. 2 years of these fragments, these glimpses of another life, and still I remember so little with certainty. I know I loved you. This feels true in my bones, in the hollow ache I carry, but I don't know why I left, or if you looked for me. Did something terrible happen between us? Did you drive me away? Or am I the one who ran? Amelia is growing so fast. She has your determination. Once she sets her mind to something, nothing deters her. Sometimes when she smiles, I see flashes of someone else in her face. Is it you? Or am I inventing connections that never existed? I will never send this letter. I don't know where to send it, and perhaps it's better this way. The Millers tell me I was frightened when they found me. Whatever I was running from, perhaps I should keep running. Still, I keep your photograph, the one piece of tangible evidence that you are real and not a figment of my fractured mind. I wish I could remember your voice. Teresa Alexander's hands trembled as he refolded the letter. The weight of her confusion, her fear, pressed against his chest like a physical burden. She hadn't left him willingly. She hadn't even remembered him fully. And she had known, or at least suspected, that Amelia was his daughter. There are dozens more, Amelia said softly, all addressed to you, spanning years. She never sent any of them. Did she ever remember more? Alexander asked, carefully returning the letter to its envelope. Amelia reached for the wooden box. Some things, small details. She kept this collection of newspaper clippings. Inside the box were yellowed newspaper articles, carefully preserved in plastic sleeves. Most were real estate announcements, property developments, business mergers, all featuring Alexander's name or photograph. She started collecting these about 15 years ago, Amelia explained. She said she recognized your face, but couldn't place how she knew you. She was too afraid to reach out. Afraid? Alexander looked up sharply. Of what? Amelia shrugged. She never explained, just said that sometimes her fear felt more real than her memories. Alexander picked up one of the journals. May I? Amelia hesitated before nodding. Those are from later years. Her early journals are more fragmented. Alexander opened to a random page, dated some 10 years after Teresa's disappearance. Today, I remembered a restaurant, red leather booths and crystal chandeliers, a waiter who called him Mr. Reed and me Miss Parker. We were celebrating something important. He gave me a small blue box, not a ring, something else. I can feel the weight of it in my hand, but can't see what's inside. These half memories are worse than no memories at all. They taunt me with glimpses of a life I can't reclaim. Alexander closed his eyes briefly. L'orangerie, he murmured. For her birthday, it was a sapphire bracelet. You remember, Amelia said, watching his face carefully. Everything, Alexander admitted. I never forgot a single moment with her. Amelia reached into the trunk again and withdrew a small, worn velvet pouch. She kept this hidden from me until right before she died. Said it was the only thing she had from before. Alexander's breath caught as Amelia tipped the contents into her palm. A delicate sapphire bracelet, the stones still brilliant despite the tarnished silver setting. I gave her this, he said hoarsely, for her 30th birthday, 6 months before our wedding date. Silence fell between them as the magnitude of the connection settled in the dusty attic air. Finally, Amelia spoke. Did you love her? The question was direct, her eyes searching his face for truth. More than anything, Alexander answered without hesitation. When she disappeared, I wasn't the same. I threw myself into work, built an empire to distract myself from the hole she left behind. But you stopped looking for her. It wasn't an accusation, but it felt like one. Alexander shook his head. I never stopped completely, but after 5 years, the private investigators had no leads. The police had closed the case. Everyone told me to move on. He met Amelia's gaze directly. I never did move on. I just got better at pretending I had. Amelia studied him, weighing his words against the evidence before her, the preserved articles, the bracelet, the letters full of confused longing. She never moved on either, she finally said. Even without her memories, she held on to you. Alexander reached tentatively for another letter, but stopped when his phone suddenly buzzed in his pocket. An unexpected intrusion of the modern world into this space suspended in time. I thought you said there was no cell service here, he said, surprised. There usually isn't, Amelia replied. Sometimes after storms, the signals get bounced differently. It never lasts. Alexander checked the screen. 5 missed calls from Victor, and now a text message. Alex. Emergency with Morgan deal. Need you back ASAP? Where are you? Private jet standing by? Send coordinates. Before Alexander could decide how to respond, another message appeared. Should I be worried? This isn't like you. Call me immediately." Alexander silenced the phone and returned it to his pocket. "Work," he explained briefly. "It can wait." Amelia nodded, but something in her expression had changed. The moment of connection had passed, replaced by the guardedness he'd come to recognize. "We should head back down," she said, beginning to return items to the trunk. "Lily will be finished with her morning lessons soon," as they carefully repacked Teresa's belongings. Alexander's mind raced with all he had learned and all that remained unknown. The letters confirmed his growing suspicion that Amelia was indeed his daughter, but they raised an even more troubling question. What had frightened Teresa so badly that she remained in hiding even after regaining fragments of her memory? And why, in all those newspaper clippings chronicling his business successes over the years, was there not a single mention of Victor Ramsey, the man who had been by his side through all of it? That night, Alexander sat on the farmhouse porch, the sound of crickets providing an unfamiliar backdrop to his thoughts. His phone had buzzed repeatedly throughout the afternoon until the signal finally faded. Victor's messages had grown increasingly urgent, but Alexander couldn't bring himself to care about the Morgan deal. Not when he was piecing together the mystery that had haunted him for 25 years. The screen of his phone illuminated once more as he scrolled through old photos he'd kept buried in a password-protected folder. Pictures of Teresa laughing on a beach in the Hamptons. Teresa concentrated over architectural drawings in their shared apartment. Teresa dancing with him at a charity gala. Each image was a needle to his heart, but he couldn't look away. Couldn't sleep. Alexander looked up to find Amelia standing in the doorway, a shawl wrapped around her shoulders against the night chill. "Too much on my mind," he admitted, turning off his phone. Amelia sat in the rocker beside him. For a while, they listened to the night sounds together in companionable silence. "I've been thinking about what we found today," she finally said. "Those letters. She really loved you, and I loved her," Alexander replied softly. "More than I ever told her, I think." "There's something that doesn't make sense," Amelia said. "If she was so afraid, why didn't she just leave this place? Why stay in Texas all those years?" Alexander had been wondering the same thing. Perhaps she felt safe here, anonymous. The Millers protected her. Maybe? Amelia didn't sound convinced. "But she collected those articles about you for years. She knew who you were, where you were. Why not reach out?" Alexander stared into the darkness. "That's what I can't figure out. Unless what? Unless she was protecting you." The thought had been forming since he'd read those letters. Think about it. She was afraid, pregnant and confused. What if she believed that whatever caused her to run in the first place might put you in danger too? Amelia considered this. That's possible. She was always hyper-vigilant, especially when I was young. She'd check the locks 3 times before bed. Wouldn't let me go into town without Earl or Mr. Miller. She paused. I always thought it was just anxiety from her accident. Alexander's mind worked through possibilities. Did she ever mention someone named Victor Ramsey? Amelia frowned. I don't think so. Who is he? My business partner. He was also my best friend at the time Teresa disappeared. Alexander hesitated. He was the last person to see her before she vanished. And you think he might have something to do with it? Amelia's tone was skeptical. I don't know, Alexander admitted. It never crossed my mind back then. He was devastated when she disappeared, or seemed to be. He helped organize search parties, offered rewards for information. But now you're not so sure. Alexander sighed. I'm questioning everything I thought I knew. A soft glow appeared on the horizon. Not sunrise, but the distant headlights of a vehicle approaching along the dirt road. Are you expecting someone? Alexander asked. Amelia shook her head, tension visible in her posture. No one. Not at this hour. They watched as the lights grew closer. Finally, a black SUV pulled up to the farmhouse, its polished surface incongruous against the rural setting. The driver's door opened, and a man in an immaculate suit stepped out, his silver hair gleaming in the moonlight. Alexander felt his blood run cold. Victor Ramsey spotted them on the porch and smiled broadly. Alex, thank God. Do you have any idea how worried we've been? He approached with arms outstretched. When your pilots returned without you, I thought the worst. Alexander rose slowly. How did you find me? Victor waved dismissively. Your pilots mentioned a farm near the emergency landing site. Not many farms in this area with a beautiful young woman and her daughter. He turned his smile on Amelia. You must be the guardian angel who's been taking care of my friend. Something about Victor's practiced charm, which had once seemed so natural, now struck Alexander as false. Had it always been this way? It's the middle of the night, Victor, Alexander said coldly. Why are you here? Victor's smile faltered slightly. The Morgan brothers pulled out of the deal this morning. We're going to lose millions if we don't get you back to New York to smooth things over. He looked between Alexander and Amelia. I can see you've been preoccupied, but business calls, old friend. You drove all this way because of a business deal. Alexander's voice was flat with disbelief. Not just any deal, the biggest of the quarter. Victor stepped closer, lowering his voice. Alex, what's going on? This isn't like you. Disappearing for days, ignoring calls, is everything all right? Before Alexander could respond, Amelia spoke. Mr. Ramsey, it's late. If you need a place to stay tonight, we can offer you the couch, but any business discussions should wait until morning. Victor looked at her with new interest. That's very kind, miss. Miller, she supplied, not offering her first name. Amelia Miller. A flicker of something, recognition, concern, crossed Victor's face so quickly Alexander almost missed it. Miller, Victor repeated. Any relation to Hannah Miller by chance? The air seemed to freeze between them. Alexander stared at Victor in shock. How could he possibly know that name? Amelia's face had gone pale. She was my mother. How did you know that? Victor's smile returned, smoother than ever. Just a lucky guess. Miller is a common name after all. He checked his watch. Actually, I think I'll find a hotel in town. We can talk in the morning, Alex. Nice meeting you, Miss Miller. With that, Victor returned to his SUV and drove away, leaving Alexander and Amelia staring after him in stunned silence. How did he know my mother's name? Amelia demanded, once the taillights had disappeared into the darkness. Alexander, what's going on? Alexander's mind raced. It couldn't be coincidence. Victor had recognized Teresa's assumed name immediately. I need to see those journals again, he said urgently. And any letters that mention Victor. They spent the next 2 hours in the attic, poring through Teresa's writings by lantern light. The pieces began falling into place. Fragmented memories of arguments overheard, of Victor's anger when Teresa and Alexander announced their engagement, of strange phone calls and unexplained threats in the weeks before the wedding. Listen to this, Alexander said, reading from one of the earliest journals. Sometimes I dream of a man with silver hair. In the dreams, he's smiling, but I'm terrified. He's holding something, papers, photographs, and telling me I have to leave, that he'll hurt someone if I don't disappear. Is this real, or just my mind creating villains to explain my fear? Amelia sat back against a trunk, her face ashen. Silver hair, like your friend. Victor's hair was dark back then, Alexander said grimly. But yes, it would have gone silver eventually. You think he threatened her? Amelia asked. Made her run away, and then caused the accident when she tried to get away, Alexander continued, the horrible truth dawning on him. She didn't remember enough to know why she was running, just that she had to get away. Alexander's phone buzzed again. Miraculously, the signal had returned. A text from Victor. Hope I didn't interrupt anything important. We have a lot to discuss tomorrow. Get some rest. Old friend. The seemingly innocuous message now read like a veiled threat. Alexander's hand tightened around the phone. I need to confront him, he said. But first, I need to know everything Teresa remembered. There has to be proof somewhere. Amelia pulled another journal from the trunk and flipped through it. Here, dated a few years ago. I remembered something today. A conversation in an office. The silver-haired man. Victor, I think. Telling me Alex would be ruined if I didn't leave. That he had evidence of something terrible. I still can't remember what. But I knew he would destroy Alex's career. Maybe worse. I think I agreed to disappear to protect Alex. Alexander closed his eyes, the pain of realization washing over him. Teresa had sacrificed everything. Their life together, her career, her identity, to protect him from whatever threat Victor had manufactured. When he opened his eyes again, he saw Amelia watching him, her expression a mixture of anger and grief. Victor Ramsey took everything from my mother, she said quietly. And now he shows up here, all these years later, like nothing happened. "He took everything from both of us," Alexander replied, a cold resolve settling in his chest. "And he's going to answer for it." The next morning dawned with ominous gray clouds gathering on the horizon. Another storm was brewing, both literally and figuratively. Alexander had slept fitfully, his dreams filled with fragments of memories. Teresa's smile, Victor's calculated friendship, the years of partnership built on what now seemed like a foundation of lies. He found Amelia in the kitchen, already dressed and making coffee. The dark circles under her eyes suggested she'd slept as poorly as he had. "I called Earl," she said without preamble. "Asked him to take Lily into town for the day. School supplies." Alexander nodded, understanding the unspoken reasoning. Whatever confrontation was coming with Victor, Lily shouldn't be around to witness it. "Good thinking," he said, accepting the mug of coffee she offered. "Did you find anything else in the journals after I went to bed?" "Nothing specific about what Victor threatened her with," Amelia replied. "But there's a pattern in her writing. Whenever she started remembering more, she'd get frightened again, like the memories themselves were dangerous." Alexander sipped his coffee, thinking, Victor was always ambitious. Even in college, he talked about building an empire. When Teresa and I got engaged, he seemed genuinely happy for us. But looking back, he shook his head, there were signs I missed. "Like what?" Amelia asked, sitting across from him at the worn kitchen table. He insisted on being involved in every aspect of the wedding planning. At the time, I thought he was being supportive. Now I wonder if he was looking for opportunities. Opportunities to what? Make her disappear? Alexander's face darkened. Possibly, or to get information he could use against her. They were interrupted by the sound of tires on gravel. Through the kitchen window, they watched Victor's sleek SUV pull up, a jarring intrusion of urban luxury in the rustic setting. "Ready?" Alexander asked quietly. Amelia's jaw tightened. "As I'll ever be." Victor entered without knocking, as if he owned the place. He wore another impeccable suit, completely inappropriate for the farm setting, and carried a leather portfolio under one arm. "Good morning," he called cheerfully. "Beautiful property you have here. Miss Miller reminds me of those pastoral paintings rich people hang in their Manhattan apartments to remind themselves that nature exists." "What do you want, Victor?" Alexander asked, not bothering with pleasantries. Victor's smile didn't falter. "Direct as always, Alex, fine. I want you to come back to New York. The Morgan deal is collapsing, and only you can salvage it." "I'm not coming back yet," Alexander replied. "There are more important matters to attend to here." Victor's gaze shifted between Alexander and Amelia, his expression calculating. "More important than the deal we've spent 6 months putting together. More important than hundreds of millions in potential revenue." He set his portfolio on the table. "What could possibly be more important than that?" "Teresa Parker," Alexander said simply. The name hung in the air between them. Victor's face remained impressively neutral, but Alexander, who had known him for decades, caught the slight tightening around his eyes. "Teresa," Victor's voice was carefully modulated. "Alex, that was 25 years ago. I understand you've never fully gotten over her, but Hannah Miller," Alexander interrupted. "That was the name Teresa used after she disappeared. After her accident. Interesting that you recognized it last night." This time, Victor couldn't quite hide his reaction, a flicker of something cold and hard in his eyes before his mask of concern returned. "I may have heard the name in passing during the investigation years ago," he said smoothly. "My memory for details has always been better than yours, Alex." "Except Hannah Miller wasn't a name that came up in the investigation," Alexander countered. "Because no one knew Teresa had survived. No one except whoever caused her accident." Victor sighed dramatically, spreading his hands. "What exactly are you implying, Alex? That I had something to do with Teresa's disappearance? That's absurd. I helped search for her. I supported you through that terrible time, while systematically taking control of more and more of the company," Alexander added. "Quite convenient timing. I stepped up because you were drowning in grief." Victor's voice rose with convincing indignation. "Someone had to keep things running while you were falling apart." Amelia, who had been watching this exchange silently, suddenly spoke. "My mother kept journals. She wrote about a man with silver hair who threatened her, who made her run away to protect Alexander from some kind of evidence that would ruin him. Victor's laugh was dismissive, the confused ramblings of an amnesiac. That's your evidence. He turned to Alexander. Alex, be reasonable. We've been friends for 30 years. Partners. I've stood by you through everything. Because it benefited you, Alexander said quietly. Everything you've ever done has been calculated for your benefit, Victor. I just never saw it clearly until now. Something shifted in Victor's demeanor, a subtle change that transformed his practiced charm into something harder, colder. Even if what you're suggesting were true, and it's not, what exactly do you think you can prove after all this time? His voice had lost its warmth entirely. The woman is dead. Her confused writings prove nothing. The casual cruelty of those words. The woman is dead struck Alexander like a physical blow. This was Teresa he was dismissing. The woman Alexander had loved more than life itself. She may be gone, Alexander said, his voice dangerously quiet. But I'm very much alive, and I have resources you can't imagine, Victor. If there's evidence of what you did, I'll find it. A flash of genuine anger crossed Victor's face. Don't threaten me, Alex. You have no idea what you're dealing with. Actually, Amelia interjected, I think that's exactly what my mother wrote. That you threatened her. That you warned her not to tell Alexander what she knew. Victor's attention snapped to Amelia, his eyes narrowing as he truly looked at her for perhaps the first time. Alexander could see the moment Victor made the connection. The resemblance to Teresa, but also the unmistakable features she had inherited from Alexander himself. Well, well, Victor said softly. Now I understand the sudden interest in ancient history. She's yours, isn't she, Alex? Alexander moved protectively closer to Amelia. That's none of your business. On the contrary, Victor replied, his voice silky. It becomes my business when my business partner abandons his responsibilities to play house with his long-lost daughter. He picked up his portfolio. How touching. A family reunion 25 years too late. Get out, Alexander said, his voice shaking with barely controlled rage. Thunder rumbled in the distance as Victor stepped closer, dropping all pretense of friendliness. Think carefully about your next move, Alex. You have a lot to lose. Your company, your reputation, everything you've built while Teresa's daughter was growing up without you. Are you threatening me? Alexander asked. Merely pointing out reality, Victor replied. Come back to New York. Save the Morgan deal. Let sleeping dogs lie. That's my friendly advice. And if I don't? Alexander challenged. Victor shrugged elegantly. Then I suppose we'll find out just how much evidence a dead woman's journals really constitute. He turned to leave, then paused at the door. Oh, and Alex, check your email. I've taken the liberty of calling an emergency board meeting for tomorrow. Your absence would be unfortunate. As Victor's SUV pulled away, the first fat drops of rain began to fall. Just as Earl's truck pulled up with Lily, the little girl ran through the growing downpour to the porch, clutching a paper bag of candy. We got caught in the rain, she announced cheerfully, oblivious to the tension still thick in the air. Who was that man in the fancy car? Amelia forced a smile. Just someone Mr. Reed works with, sweetheart. Why don't you go change into dry clothes? After Lily disappeared inside, Amelia turned to Alexander, her expression grim. He's not going to stop, is he? No, Alexander said, watching the rain now falling in sheets. He's had 25 years to cover his tracks. He won't let the truth come out now. So what do we do? Amelia asked. Lightning flashed, illuminating Alexander's face. His expression no longer that of a polished businessman, but of a man who had finally found something worth fighting for. We find proof, he said, and we make him pay for what he took from us. The storm raged throughout the afternoon, mirroring the turmoil within the farmhouse. Alexander paced the living room while Amelia sat with Teresa's journals spread around her, searching for any concrete evidence of Victor's involvement in her mother's disappearance. There has to be something more, Alexander muttered, pausing to stare out at the rain-lashed landscape. Victor wouldn't have come all this way just because of a business deal. He seemed rattled when he realized who I was, Amelia observed, looking up from a journal. Like he hadn't considered that Teresa might have been pregnant when she disappeared. Alexander nodded slowly. That makes sense. If he threatened Teresa to leave, he wouldn't have known about you. It wasn't public knowledge yet. We were planning to announce it at our wedding. A distant memory surfaced. Teresa touching her stomach, smiling secretively as they discussed wedding details. "Let's wait until after the ceremony to tell everyone," she had said. "I want it to be just our news for a little while longer." The sound of Lily's footsteps on the stairs broke into his thoughts. "Mama, I'm bored," she announced. "Can I go to the barn? I want to see if the kittens have opened their eyes yet." "Not in this storm, sweetheart," Amelia replied. "Why don't you draw for a while? You can show Mr. Reed your pictures later." Lily brightened at this suggestion and settled at the kitchen table with her crayons, occasionally glancing curiously at the adults and their intense conversation. Earl entered, dripping from the short walk between the barn and the house. "Storm's getting worse," he reported, hanging his wet coat by the door. "Creek's rising too. If it keeps up, the old road might flood." "The one that leads to town?" Alexander asked. Earl nodded. "It's happened before. Could be cut off for a day or two if the rain doesn't let up." A thought struck Alexander. The road where Teresa had her accident. Was it near a creek? Earl's weathered face grew thoughtful. Matter of fact, it was Miller's Creek, about 10 miles north of here. "Why, just a theory," Alexander said, his mind working quickly. "Earl, do you remember anything unusual about Teresa's accident? Anything that didn't seem quite right?" The old man settled into an armchair, his expression distant with recollection. "Well, the Millers always thought it was strange there was no other car involved. Looked like she'd swerved off the road deliberately, almost, and..." He hesitated. "What?" Amelia pressed. "Her car. It was expensive. Luxury model. But there was no luggage. Nothing personal inside except her purse. Like she'd left in a hurry with nothing but the clothes on her back." Alexander and Amelia exchanged glances. It fit with their theory that Teresa had fled suddenly after being threatened. "One more thing," Earl added. "The night before the Millers found her, one of their neighbors reported seeing a dark sedan parked at the creek crossing. Thought it was strange because nobody really came out that way unless they had business at one of the farms." "A dark sedan," Alexander repeated, like the kind Victor always preferred. "Could be coincidence," Earl cautioned. "Too many coincidences," Alexander said firmly. "Victor knew exactly where to find us. He recognized Teresa's assumed name immediately, and now we learn a car matching his preference was seen near her accident site." A loud crack of thunder made them all jump. Lily abandoned her drawing and came to sit close to her mother, eyes wide. "I don't like this storm," she whispered. "It'll pass." "Sweetheart," Amelia assured her, but her eyes met Alexander's with worry, not just for the storm, but for what they were uncovering. Alexander's phone buzzed. The erratic signal had returned briefly. A new email from Victor marked urgent. "Board members informed of your unauthorized absence. Questions being raised about your leadership. Last chance to return before vote of no confidence. Car will be at farm at 9 a.m. Alexander showed the message to Amelia. "He's trying to back me into a corner." "What will happen if there's a vote against you?" she asked. "I could lose control of my company," Alexander replied. "But that's not what matters right now." The conviction in his voice seemed to surprise Amelia. "What does matter? Finding justice for Teresa," he said simply. "And," he hesitated, "getting to know my daughter." The words hung in the air between them. It was the first time either had explicitly acknowledged the biological connection they both suspected. Amelia's expression softened slightly. But before she could respond, Lily spoke up. "Is it time to check the old cellar yet?" she asked, seemingly apropos of nothing. "What cellar, sweetie?" Amelia asked. "The one Grandma Hannah told me about," Lily explained. "Behind the barn. She said that's where she kept her special treasures, the ones nobody was supposed to find." Alexander and Amelia stared at the child in shock. "Lily, when did Grandma tell you this?" Amelia asked carefully. "Before she went to heaven," Lily replied. "She said someday, when the right person came looking for answers, I should show them the old cellar. Is Mr. Reed the right person, Mama?" Amelia looked at Alexander, her eyes wide. "I had no idea there was a cellar behind the barn. This farm has been in the Miller family for generations. There are probably structures I don't even know about. We need to check it," Alexander said, already moving toward his coat. "But the storm," Amelia began. "Can't wait," Alexander finished, pulling on his boots. "If Teresa hid something important enough to tell only Lily about, we need to find it before Victor returns." Earl stood as well. "I'll come with you," got flashlights in the kitchen drawer. Despite Amelia's protests, the three of them ventured out into the storm. Lily bundled in a raincoat and held tightly in Earl's arms. The short distance to the barn felt much longer as they battled wind and rain, the ground already turning to thick mud beneath their feet. Inside the barn, it was marginally drier but nearly pitch black. Earl's flashlights cut through the darkness, revealing stacked hay bales, farm equipment, and a few curious goats. "Where's the cellar, Lily?" Alexander asked. "Behind the barn," she insisted. "Under the big tree." They circled around the back of the structure where a massive oak spread its branches. At first, Alexander saw nothing unusual, just windblown grass and mud. But as they searched more carefully, Earl's flashlight revealed an old wooden door set almost flush with the ground, its edges so overgrown it was nearly invisible. "Well, I'll be damned," Earl muttered, handing Lily to Amelia and bending to pull at the door. It resisted at first, swollen with moisture and age, then gave way with a groan of protesting hinges. Stone steps led down into darkness. The air that wafted up was cool and earthy, but not damp. The space below had remained surprisingly dry despite its age. "I'll go first," Alexander said, taking one of the flashlights. The cellar was small but solidly built, with stone walls and a packed earth floor. It appeared to have been used for food storage originally. Old wooden shelves lined the walls, still holding a few dusty mason jars, but in the center of the space stood a small metal trunk, conspicuously newer than its surroundings. "That's Grandma's treasure box," Lily said with certainty. Alexander approached the trunk carefully. Unlike the one in the attic, this had a combination lock securing it. He turned to Lily. "Did your grandmother tell you how to open it?" Lily nodded solemnly. "My birthday," Amelia gasped softly. "Her birthday is February 14th, 214. Alexander tried the combination, 0214. The lock clicked open. Inside the trunk, wrapped carefully in oilcloth, they found a waterproof bag containing a laptop, an old model, but well-preserved, and a manila envelope. Alexander handed the envelope to Amelia while he examined the computer. "It still has some battery," he noted with surprise, pressing the power button. "She must have kept it charged occasionally." Amelia opened the envelope, pulling out a stack of documents. "These are financial records," she said, scanning the pages. "From Reed Enterprises, dated a few months before she disappeared." Her eyes widened. "And there's a flash drive." Alexander looked up from the laptop's login screen. "We need the password." "Try her name," Earl suggested. "Which one?" Amelia asked. "Teresa or Hannah?" Alexander thought for a moment. "Try Architect Them9. It was her username for everything." Amelia typed it in, and the screen unlocked, revealing a desktop with a single folder labeled Insurance. Inside were dozens of files, financial documents, scanned letters, and photographs. Alexander clicked on one image and felt his blood run cold. It showed Victor in his office, handing an envelope to a man Alexander recognized as a city official who had been later convicted of corruption. "She had evidence," Alexander whispered. "Evidence of Victor's illegal dealings." "Look at this," Amelia said, pointing to a document from the envelope. "It's a memo detailing how funds were being diverted from your joint projects into offshore accounts." As they continued exploring the contents, the story became clear. Teresa, working on architectural plans for a major development, had accidentally discovered evidence of Victor's corruption. The memo indicated he had been systematically bribing officials and falsifying documents for years. "This would have ruined him," Alexander said, the realization dawning. "If she had come forward with this, so he threatened her," Amelia continued, "made her believe that you were somehow implicated too, that you'd both go down if she didn't disappear, and then caused her accident to make sure she couldn't change her mind." Alexander finished grimly. "He's been building his fortune on corruption from the beginning, using my company as cover." A particularly violent gust of wind rattled the cellar door above them. Earl glanced upward uneasily. "We should get back to the house. This storm's not letting up." As they carefully repacked Teresa's evidence and made their way back through the downpour, Alexander felt a grim determination settling in his chest. Teresa had safeguarded this evidence for decades, waiting for the moment when it could finally bring Victor to justice. Tomorrow, When Victor returned expecting to find Alexander defeated, he would instead find himself facing the truth Teresa had sacrificed everything to protect. By morning, the storm had passed, leaving the farm drenched but largely undamaged. Water pooled in the low spots of the yard, and broken branches littered the driveway. But the house and barn stood firm. Alexander had barely slept, spending most of the night examining Teresa's evidence on the aging laptop. The full extent of Victor's corruption was breathtaking. Teresa had meticulously documented everything: bribes to city officials, falsified environmental reports, funds siphoned through shell companies. Most damning of all was a series of emails in which Victor discussed using Alexander's reputation and connections as cover for his illegal activities. "He used me," Alexander murmured as dawn broke through the kitchen window. "All these years, he used my name, my company, while I was too blinded by grief to notice." Amelia set a fresh cup of coffee in front of him. She looked as exhausted as he felt. "What will you do with the evidence?" "Take it to the authorities," Alexander replied. "The statute of limitations has expired on some of these crimes, but not all of them, at minimum. It will destroy him professionally." "And what about—" Amelia hesitated, not meeting his eyes. "What about us?" The question hung between them, laden with implications. Alexander set down the laptop and faced her directly. "Amelia, the evidence is overwhelming. The timing of your birth, Teresa's letters, your resemblance to both of us. I believe you are my daughter." His voice softened. "I'd like to be part of your life, if you'll let me." Amelia's expression remained guarded. "And how exactly do you envision that working?" "You'll fly in from New York for occasional visits, send birthday cards, play the doting grandfather when it's convenient." Alexander was taken aback by the bitterness in her tone. "I was thinking of something more substantial than that." "Were you?" She shook her head. "You have a life, Alexander, a company, responsibilities. I have my life here. Lily's whole world is this farm. Things can change," Alexander suggested. "Arrangements can be made." Amelia's laugh held no humor. "Just like that? After 26 years, you think you can just step in and become family?" She stood abruptly. "My mother raised me alone. She worked herself to exhaustion to provide for me, to create a safe home. Meanwhile, you were building skyscrapers and making billions." "I didn't know you existed," Alexander protested. "If I had—" "You would have what?" Amelia challenged. "Searched harder. You said yourself you eventually gave up looking for her." The accusation stung because it contained a kernel of truth. Alexander had never completely stopped searching for Teresa, but his efforts had dwindled over the years as he threw himself into work instead. "I made mistakes," he admitted. "I should have kept looking, should have hired better investigators. But I can't change the past, Amelia. I can only try to be here now." The sound of an approaching vehicle interrupted their conversation. Victor's sleek SUV appeared through the trees. "Right on schedule." "He's here," Alexander said grimly, gathering Teresa's evidence into a briefcase he'd found in the cellar. Amelia's face hardened. "Go, confront him. Do what you need to do. But don't expect me to welcome you into our lives afterward." Alexander stared at her, stunned by the finality in her voice. "Amelia." "No," she cut him off. "My mother spent her life afraid, constantly looking over her shoulder because of the world you and Victor built together. A world of power plays and corruption and people being treated as disposable. I don't want any part of that for Lily or myself." Before Alexander could respond, the SUV parked, and Victor emerged, looking fresh and immaculate despite the early hour. This time, he had a driver with him, a hulking man who remained by the vehicle, sunglasses hiding his eyes despite the overcast sky. "Good morning," Victor called cheerfully. "Beautiful day after the storm. Have you reconsidered my offer?" "Alex." Alexander stepped onto the porch, briefcase in hand. "I have, Victor, but I have a counteroffer." Victor's smile faltered slightly. "I'm listening." "I resign as CEO of Reed Enterprises," Alexander said calmly. "Effective immediately." Victor's surprise was genuine. "What, Alex? If this is about the board meeting, I'm sure we can smooth things over." "In exchange," Alexander continued as if Victor hadn't spoken, "these documents stay private." He patted the briefcase. "Teresa's insurance policy." The color drained from Victor's face. "What are you talking about? What documents?" Evidence of every illegal deal you've ever made. Every bribe. Every falsified report. Every penny you've stolen. Alexander's voice was cold. Teresa found them before she disappeared, before you threatened her and caused her accident. Victor's practiced composure crumbled. You can't prove any of that. But his eyes were fixed on the briefcase, his confidence visibly shaken. Can I? Alexander opened the briefcase just enough for Victor to glimpse the contents. 25 years of corruption, Victor. How many people would go to prison? How many millions in fines? Your entire empire would collapse. Victor's eyes darted between Alexander and the farmhouse, where Amelia could be seen through the window watching them. What do you want? He asked, his voice tight. I told you, I'm resigning. You get the company. I keep my personal wealth and investments separate from Reed Enterprises, and you never contact me, Amelia, or Lily again. The negotiation that followed was tense but brief. Victor, once he realized the extent of the evidence against him, became remarkably cooperative. By the time his SUV disappeared down the driveway, Alexander had secured everything he wanted: a clean break from Reed Enterprises, and assurances that Victor would never trouble Amelia's family when Alexander returned to the farmhouse. Amelia was waiting in the living room, her expression unreadable. It's done, he said. Victor won't bother us again. Us, Amelia repeated. There is no us, Alexander. You made a deal for yourself. I did it to protect you and Lily, Alexander insisted, to give Teresa justice in the only way left to us. And now you'll go back to your world, and we'll stay in ours. Amelia's voice was flat. That's for the best. Alexander felt something breaking inside him. Amelia, please. I know I can't replace the years we lost, but we can build something new. No, she said firmly. My mother lost everything because of the world you inhabit. I won't risk Lily being touched by that. She deserves the peaceful life Teresa worked so hard to create for us. I gave up the company, Alexander argued. I'm not that world anymore. Amelia shook her head sadly. You still don't understand. It's not just about what you do. It's about who you are. A man who builds empires doesn't suddenly become a simple farmer. You'd bring your complications with you, your connections, your enemies. We've had enough of that. The finality in her voice was unmistakable. Alexander looked around the simple farmhouse that had, in just a few days, come to mean more to him than his penthouse ever had. His gaze fell on the silver-framed photograph of Teresa, the woman he'd loved and lost, the mother of the daughter who now rejected him. I'll arrange for a car, he said quietly. I won't impose on you any longer. Lily came downstairs then, rubbing sleep from her eyes. Are you leaving, Mr. Reed? She asked, her small voice piercing the tension. Alexander knelt to her level. Yes. Lily, I have to go home now. Will you come back to visit? I wanted to show you when the kittens open their eyes. Alexander glanced at Amelia, whose face remained resolute, despite the tears gathering in her eyes. I don't think so, sweetheart. But thank you for showing me your farm. It's the most special place I've ever been. The car arrived an hour later. Alexander stood on the porch with his hastily packed suitcase, the briefcase of evidence, and a heart heavier than both combined. If you ever need anything, he told Amelia. Financial help, medical care, anything at all. We'll be fine, she interrupted. We always have been. Alexander nodded, accepting her decision even as it tore at him. Goodbye, Amelia. As the car pulled away, Alexander looked back at the farmhouse growing smaller in the distance. In just a few days, he had found answers to the mystery that had haunted half his life, discovered he had a daughter and granddaughter, and lost them all again. The driver glanced at him in the rearview mirror. Where to, sir? Alexander stared out at the passing Texas landscape, realizing he had no answer. For the first time in 25 years, he had no company to run, no meetings to attend, no empire to maintain. He was as adrift as he had been the night of the storm. Sir? The driver prompted. Just drive, Alexander said quietly. I'll let you know. 3 days after Alexander's departure, Amelia stood in her mother's room, the same room Teresa, Hannah, as Amelia had known her, had occupied for over 2 decades. She'd avoided this space since her mother's death, finding it too painful to confront the emptiness. But now, with Alexander gone and so many questions still lingering, she felt drawn to this sanctuary of memories. The room was simple, like the rest of the farmhouse, but touches of Teresa's personality remained. Watercolor paintings of the Texas landscape on the walls, a collection of smooth river stones on the windowsill, books about architecture and design lining a small bookshelf. Amelia ran her fingers along the spines, remembering how her mother would sketch buildings that existed only in her fractured memory. "Were you happy here, Mom?" Amelia whispered to the empty room. "Or were you just hiding all these years?" She sat on the edge of the bed, overwhelmed by conflicting emotions. Part of her regretted sending Alexander away so harshly. Another part remained convinced she'd made the right decision, protecting Lily from the complications that seemed to follow wealth and power. A soft knock drew her attention to the doorway, where Earl stood hesitantly. "Lily's asking for you," he said. "She's in the attic. Says she found something important." Amelia found her daughter kneeling beside an old hat box, previously overlooked among Teresa's belongings. Lily looked up as her mother entered, her expression unusually solemn. "I found Grandma's secret box," she announced. "She showed me once, but said it was only for when the man in her picture came looking for her." "What man, sweetheart?" Amelia asked, though she already suspected the answer. "The man in the picture on her dresser, Mr. Reed." Lily opened the hat box, revealing a sealed envelope on top of various keepsakes. A pressed flower, ticket stubs, a small velvet jewelry box. "She said if he ever came, I should give him this letter, but he left before I could remember." Amelia carefully lifted the envelope. Alexander Reed was written on the front in Teresa's handwriting, steadier than in her earlier letters, more certain. The date on the corner read just 2 weeks before her death. "Can we give it to him?" Lily asked. Amelia hesitated. "I don't know where he is now, sweetheart, but he should have it," Lily insisted with a child's simple certainty. "Grandma said it was important. She said it would help him understand." Later that night, after Lily was asleep, Amelia sat at the kitchen table staring at the sealed envelope. She had no way to contact Alexander. No phone number, no address. In her determination to keep her world separate from his, she had ensured they had no connection. Earl watched her from across the table, his weathered face thoughtful. "You know, your mother lived her whole life with regrets," he said quietly, "never knowing what might have been if she'd reached out sooner. That was different," Amelia argued. "She was protecting us." "And what are you protecting now?" Earl asked gently. "Teresa kept those letters because she couldn't bear to completely let go. She collected those articles because she still cared what happened to him. And in the end, she wrote him one last letter." "What if she was warning me against him?" Amelia countered. "What if this letter says to stay away?" Earl raised an eyebrow. "Then you'd be honoring her wishes by making sure he got it." Amelia sighed. Knowing Earl was right, she turned the envelope over in her hands, noticing something she'd missed. A second, smaller envelope paper-clipped to the back, with Amelia written on it in the same steady handwriting. Her hands trembled slightly as she opened it. Inside was a single sheet of paper, covered in her mother's familiar script. "My dearest Amelia, if you're reading this, I'm gone, and Alexander has somehow found his way to you. I always believed he would someday. I know you'll have questions. Why I never told you about him. Why I kept us hidden for so long. The truth is complicated. And for many years, I didn't fully understand it myself. My memories came back in fragments, never the complete picture. But as I near the end, things have become clearer. I never told you that your father abandoned us. He didn't know about you. I left to protect him, believing lies told by someone I thought was his friend. By the time I realized the truth, too many years had passed, and I was afraid he would reject us, afraid of disrupting the life we'd built, afraid of the powerful man who had threatened me. But my greatest regret is that I let fear make my decisions. I robbed you of a father, and I robbed Alexander of the joy of knowing you. Please, give him my letter, and whatever you decide about your future relationship with him, make that decision from love, not fear. Don't repeat my mistake of letting fear determine your path. All my love, always." Mom tears streamed down Amelia's face as she finished reading. All these years, her mother had carried this burden alone, protecting them both from a threat that had now been neutralized. And in her final days, Teresa had wanted to make things right. "I need to find him," Amelia said, wiping her eyes. He deserves to read what she wrote. Earl nodded. The day after tomorrow is when I drive into Austin for supplies. We could make some calls. See if we can track him down, man, like that can't be too hard to find. The following morning, as Amelia was feeding the chickens, she heard the sound of tires on the gravel driveway. Her heart jumped, thinking it might somehow be Alexander returning. Instead, a different luxury vehicle pulled up. A black Bentley, driven by a chauffeur who stepped out and approached her with professional courtesy. "Ms. Miller," he inquired, "I have something for you from Mr. Reed." He handed her a simple white envelope containing a single sheet of paper. Not the formal legal document she had half expected, but a handwritten note. "Amelia, I respect your decision and won't intrude on your life again without invitation. But I wanted you to know that I've purchased the Miller farm and the surrounding 500 acres, which I've transferred to a trust in your and Lily's names. The land is yours, free and clear, with no obligations. I've also established a separate educational trust for Lily's future. Earl has the details if you wish to accept it. This isn't an attempt to buy my way into your lives. It's simply what I would have done years ago had I known about you, ensuring you had security and opportunities. I'll be staying at the Riverfront Hotel in Austin for the next week before returning to New York. If you ever change your mind about anything, that's where you can find me." Alexander Amelia read the note twice, emotions warring within her. Part of her wanted to reject his gesture as another example of thinking money could solve everything, but another part recognized it for what it was, the only way he knew to care for them from a distance. She looked at the envelope containing Teresa's final letter, then at her mother's note with its plea not to let fear make her decisions. "Can you wait a moment?" she asked the chauffeur. "I have something that needs to be delivered to Mr. Reed." That evening, Alexander sat in his hotel suite overlooking the Austin skyline, feeling more alone than he had in decades. The glass of scotch at his elbow remained untouched. His appetite for the trappings of his former life diminished. He had spent the day in meetings with lawyers, restructuring his remaining investments and philanthropic endeavors now that Reed Enterprises was no longer his primary focus. A knock at the door interrupted his thoughts. Expecting hotel staff, he was stunned to find Amelia standing in the hallway, Lily half hidden behind her. "You left before I could give you something," Amelia said without preamble, extending an envelope. "From my mother, she wrote it before she died." Alexander took the envelope with trembling hands. "Thank you for bringing this." "Read it," Amelia said. "Now, please." Surprised by her intensity, Alexander carefully opened the envelope and unfolded the letter inside. "My dearest Alexander, if you're reading this, you finally found your way to our daughter. I always believed you would, somehow. As I write this, I know my time is short. My memories, once so fragmented, have been returning more clearly these past few months. Perhaps the mind, sensing its end, fights to put its house in order. I remember everything now. The fear when Victor showed me those falsified documents implicating you in his schemes. His threat that we would both go to prison if I didn't disappear. I remember driving away, terrified and heartbroken, not knowing I was carrying our child. I remember the car that forced me off the road when I tried to call you from a gas station, and I remember waking up in the Miller's home. My past a shattered mirror with only fragments remaining. By the time I understood what had happened, years had passed. You had built your empire alongside the man who separated us. Amelia was growing into a beautiful child who knew nothing of her father, and I was still afraid, not just of Victor, but of disrupting the life we'd created here. My greatest regret is that I let fear guide me for too long. I should have found a way to tell you the truth, to give you the chance to know your daughter, Alexander. Whatever life has made of you in these intervening years, I know the heart of the man I loved. If you're reading this, it means you never stopped looking completely. It means some part of you remained faithful to what we shared. Forgive me for the years I've stolen from you. And please, don't lose Amelia again. She has your determination, your intelligence, and yes, sometimes your stubbornness. She may resist at first. She has built her identity on the story of a mother who raised her alone, but she deserves to know her father. And you deserve to know the amazing woman she has become. I have always loved you, even when I couldn't remember your name. Forever yours. Teresa Alexander looked up from the letter, tears streaming unchecked down his face. She remembered, he whispered. In the end, she remembered everything. She wanted me to know you, Amelia said, her own eyes glistening. "And I sent you away." Alexander shook his head. "You were protecting your family just as she did." Lily, who had been watching this exchange with solemn curiosity, suddenly stepped forward. "Does this mean you're my grandpa for real?" she asked. "Because Mama cried after you left, and I think she misses you." Amelia gave a watery laugh at her daughter's directness. "Lily, it's okay," Alexander said, kneeling to Lily's level. "Yes, I am your grandfather, and I would very much like to be part of your lives, if your mother agrees." Amelia took a deep breath, Teresa's words echoing in her mind. "Make that decision from love, not fear." "I don't want to live in New York," she said firmly. "Our home is the farm." Alexander nodded. "I understand. But," Amelia continued, "there's a lot of land on that property. Enough for a second house, perhaps, if someone wanted to live nearby." The hope that bloomed in Alexander's eyes was almost painful to witness. "I could build something small," he said quickly. "Simple, nothing ostentatious. And you'd have to learn about farming," Amelia added. "Really learn, not just visit occasionally." "I'd like that," Alexander said, and was surprised to realize how deeply he meant it, as a tentative smile spread across Amelia's face. Alexander felt something shift within him, a burden lifting, a wound beginning to heal. Teresa was gone, but the family they had created lived on later. As the three of them walked in a nearby park, Lily skipping ahead, Amelia spoke softly. "Mother wrote that sometimes the storm doesn't come to destroy,